Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 61, Wardrobe Malfunction. Did I pass out again? When Judas opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. I've lost. The moment he abandoned strategy and went head-to-head with Elise had sealed his defeat. Still, he felt surprisingly calm. The loss didn't sting, not when he had gained something far more valuable than victory. Freya Familia. Elise. I'll get my win back. He shifted slightly, noticing the bandages wrapped around his torso. His injuries weren't too severe. I really need to stop losing consciousness after every big fight. He muttered with a sigh, tossing the blanket aside and sitting up. I see you're awake. The voice drew his attention to the far side of the room. There, sitting in a chair, was Goddess Astrea, knitting. Or, at least, trying to. Whatever she was making vaguely resembled a scarf, but it was a tangled mess. She's terrible at it. Judas mused silently, though Astrea seemed to read him instantly. It's a new hobby, she said with a small smile. I'm not as dexterous as I thought, but I've started to enjoy it. She gently set the scarf on the table beside her. I apologize, Goddess Astrea. Oh? Astrea raised an eyebrow. You don't need to apologize for something so trivial. It only means I need to practice more. No. Judas shook his head. I mean for damaging your home, and your backyard. I promise I'll pay for the repairs. Astrea studied him quietly before her lips softened into a smile. You don't need to worry about that. My children initiated the duel. The responsibility lies with us, not you. Still, with my magic, I can. Astrea lifted a hand to silence him. It's handled. What you need now is rest. Before Judas could argue further, a sharp knock came at the door. Astrea turned with an amused expression. Looks like we have guests. The door burst open and in spilled Elise, Lyra, Kaguya, and several other members of the Astrea Familia. Judas. You alright? I hope I didn't hit you too hard. Elise said, inspecting him worriedly. The way you crashed after she sent you flying was brutal. Lyra added with a sly grin. Bounced 3 times like a rubber ball. Our captain can be like a gorilla sometimes, zero gentleness. Kaguya added, joining in the teasing until Astrea's calm but firm voice cut across the room. Everyone, tone it down. Let Judas recover in peace. Yes, Goddess Astrea. They chorused. Satisfied, Astrea gave them a gentle smile. I hope you recover quickly. After watching your fight with Elise, I've been itching to test myself against you. Kaguya said with a feral grin, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Meanwhile, several of the younger members lingered in the doorway, whispering among themselves as they stared at Judas. Now that I see him up close, he really is kinda cute. Strong too. Wonder if he has a girlfriend? Hey, anyone know how old he is? They thought they were whispering quietly, but Elise, Judas, and the others, being high-level adventurers, picked up every word with their heightened senses. Ryu's face turned scarlet, her ears twitching as steam practically poured from her head. Lyra smirked and nudged Judas with her elbow a few times. He ignored it, pretending not to care. Astrea cleared her throat delicately. Now, my children. Don't overwhelm him when he had just woken up, she said, hoping to silence their gossip. It's fine, Goddess Astrea. I'm already good to go, Judas said as he swung his legs off the bed. But his robe, loosely tied, slipped free and fell to the floor. Oh, crap. A beat of silence. Then. Kya! A chorus of screams erupted as several women spun away, their faces bright red. There were others, however, shamelessly stole glances. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Would you look at that? Lyra clicked her tongue with a grin. That cute face was hiding a real monster. Talk about a surprise. I agree. Kaguya added with an approving nod. Looks to be about 6 inches even at limp. Bigger than average. The two spoke with complete nonchalance, their eyes brazenly glued to him. What are you doing? Get a towel, quick. Elise, unlike them, had a faint blush on her face as she scrambled to wrap a towel around Judas. She glanced over and spotted Ryu, her entire head redder than a tomato as she tried to look anywhere but at him. Ahem. Excuse us. Astria said calmly, though the slight pink on her cheeks didn't escape notice. She ushered her children out of the room. And thus, a rumor spread like wildfire through the women of Ororio. Judas Spade, the rising star of the Loki Familia, was exceptionally well endowed. Late at night. At the Twilight Manor. He's at it again. How many hours has he been sitting out there? Ren muttered, pouring himself a cup of water as he peered through the window. Outside, Judas sat motionless in the training grounds, legs crossed in meditation. I think he said something about repairing his mana core or whatever. Loki yawned, resting her chin on her hand as she joined him by the window. Good for him. Ren shrugged and took a sip of water. In the abandoned church, the home of the Hestia Familia. Inside Belle and Alphea's bedroom. Alphea sat in silence, staring at Belle's sleeping face for a few seconds as she held a piece of paper in her hands. Looks like her training in dungeon exploration has been going well. She muttered, glancing at the paper in mild satisfaction. Belle Crannel. LV1. STR, I-50 H-172. End, H-101 G-252. Dex, I-55 H-181. AGI, I-71 G-223. Mag, I-0. Skills, Tenebris Vitalis. Liaris Freeze. Magic. Liaris Freeze. What she bore witness to was a level of growth even she had never seen before. At this rate, it would take at least a month for her to become eligible for a rank up. Even if it was a snail's pace compared to the current record, Belle's growth was still lightning fast when measured against other adventurers, whose progress could only be marked in years. But it's not enough, this can become much faster. Her mind drifted toward Judas Spade, the boy who had managed to capture her niece's heart. I think it's about time. The time had finally come for her to test him herself. Judas Spade, you had better not disappoint me. She murmured, her eyes narrowing as the air itself trembled beneath her oppressive presence. Chapter 62, Rose Fanet's Worries. Early in the morning, inside the Twilight Manor. Seriously, waking me up so early in the morning, the sun has just risen and you're already asking your poor old goddess for a status update. You couldn't have just asked me last night? Loki yawned as her eyes drifted toward Judas, who had just entered her room. Sorry. I forgot. Judas muttered with a wry smile. Alright, just sit down and take off your shirt. I'm also curious to see how much you've grown after Freya and Astria's kids kicked your butt. He nodded as he pulled his shirt off, his mind drifting back to the duel he'd had with Kaguya yesterday. I got completely wrecked. The result had been a very depressing loss. Elise was definitely stronger than Kaguya as an adventurer. If the two fought without holding back, if she used her magic, Judas was sure Elise would most likely come out on top. However, when it came to pure close combat, Kaguya was even more oppressive than Elise. Even Ryu admitted that Kaguya was the strongest hand-to-hand combatant in the Astria Familia. Besides her swordsmanship, she also possessed powerful leg techniques. Judas had made the mistake of using her as a whetstone to hone his close combat skills, just as he did with Elise. As a result, Kaguya had literally beaten him within an inch of his life. She was an experienced warrior and had learned from watching his fight against Elise. Which meant she didn't even give him time to cast magic before a barrage of sword strikes came crashing down on him. He was defeated before he could even unleash a single attack spell. The most damage he had managed was a few scratches on her clothes before being knocked out. It still stings, even though the injury has completely healed. Judas rubbed the top of his head, feeling phantom pain from Kagaya's sword strikes. He turned his back toward Loki as he sat down on the bed. "Hey, kid. Why do I keep hearing rumors about your Willy? What did you do at Astria's place?" Loki smirked as she pricked her finger with a knife, letting a drop of blood fall onto Judas' back. "What the hell, word spread that fast?" Judas inhaled deeply, steadying his nerves as he ignored her question. "Too fast. Someone must have spread it on purpose." For some reason, Lyra's smug, shit-eating grin popped into his mind. "Hey, you shy?" Loki teased when he stayed silent. "You know, a lot of goddesses have been pestering me to confirm this rumor. After we finish your update, why don't you take off your pants so I can check for myself?" Her grin widened. "Loki, if you don't shut up right now." Judas' voice dropped into a menacing growl, a heavy pressure filling the room and making Loki break into a nervous sweat. All right. I was only joking, geez." She muttered quickly, inscribing his updated status onto parchment. "Here you go, all finished." Loki handed him the sheet, her grin returning. "Looks like your run-in with the Freya Familia, and that spar with Scarlet Harnell, paid off big time." Judas Spade. LV2. STR, I29D 599. End, I27, C651. Dex, I32, C612. AGI, I25, C618. Mag, I75, S901. Mage I. Skills, The Blessing of the Whirl Tree. Elemental Master. Eternal Persistence. The Venerated One. Penitent Executioner. Magic, Otherworld Thaumaturgy 5th tier. Body Reinforcement. It's not quite on the level of your first big status update, but an increase of over 3,100 points is still insane. Loki added as Judas silently read through his status sheet before handing it back to the goddess. "To be honest, you're already eligible for a rank up. The feat of escaping the pursuit of a bunch of first-class adventurers is more than enough for you to qualify to become a level 3. She said, opening her slit eyes and watching Judas put his shirt back on. "But I suppose you want to wait for your status to grow a bit more, right?" She continued, her grin widening. "That's right. I don't want to rank up until I hit EX in every single parameter on my status," Judas said as the two met each other's gaze. "A perfectionist, huh? Well, you do you. Now get out of here, I'm going back to sleep." Loki shooed him away as she fell flat on the bed. Judas nodded before leaving the room. "I guess I should go to the guild." After going into his room and changing into a new set of clothes, Judas walked out the manor gates and headed toward the guild. A couple of minutes later, Judas was already in front of the guild headquarters. "Miss Rose, good morning." Judas greeted the red-haired wolf receptionist at the counter, who gave him a polite nod in acknowledgement. "Mr. Judas, good morning," Rose replied. "I heard from your goddess that you got attacked yesterday in the dungeon. Are you all right?" Rose asked as she inspected his body with her vision. Her face was as cold as ice, but there was a hint of worry in her voice. "I'm fine, no hidden injuries. I'm good to go," Judas replied. "If you say so." "Just don't push yourself trying to act tough," Rose muttered as she arranged some files on the table before putting them away. "I'm assuming you're here because you want to learn about the lower floors?" she asked, her fingers resting on her chin. "You're not going to discourage me? A level 2 heading to the lower floors?" Judas questioned with raised brows. "Normally I would, a level 2 going to the lower floors is no different from suicide. But I know that the adventurer I'm advising is not normal," she said. An anomaly among anomalies. To be honest, there were multiple occasions when I thought I wanted to throw you to someone else, to another advisor, to relieve myself of the burden of dealing with you. She paused for a second before looking at him directly in the eyes. There is no doubt that someone like you, who attracts trouble left and right like some sort of main character, is most likely to die. Judas remained silent. He had no words at that moment. However, that day, the very day we shook hands, I made a promise. A promise to become your advisor. She continued and pulled out a fairly thick book before slamming it onto the counter. So you better be prepared, because I'm going to impart as much knowledge as I can into that brain of yours. Rose had seen too many adventurers die. She also knew that she couldn't stop or slow Judas down from advancing further. He was growing fast, too fast for her liking. It has barely been a week and he's already thinking of going to the lower floors. She thought, knowing more troubles would come if she continued to associate with him. But she didn't care. To make sure you come back alive, she said quietly. She just wanted him back safe and sound. The only thing she could do. I will advise you to the best of my abilities. Chapter 63, Shopping Date. Inside the private meeting room of the guild headquarters, Judas and his advisor sat across from each other, the faint rustle of pages filling the quiet room. With a serious expression, Rose Fanet was in the middle of a lecture about the lower floors, while Judas listened intently, like a model student. I think that's it for today, Rose finally said, closing the book that lay open on the table. 3 hours have passed since we started, Judas thought, glancing at the clock on the wall. I have an hour left before I need to head to the central square. It was now 9 a.m., his scheduled meeting with the women of the Astrea Familia was set for 10. Now that you know most of the geographical layout of the 19th to 27th floors, as well as the recommended pathways, I'd say you're ready to head deeper into the dungeon. Rose's expression softened into a rare, satisfied smile as her eyes fell on Judas. He actually managed to go through my lessons without a single complaint. From years of experience, Rose knew most adventurers were muscleheads with the scholarly aptitude of a brick. They'd grumble, fidget, and lose focus within minutes. To them, sitting still and reading for hours was nothing short of torture. Some even came up with the most ridiculous excuses just to escape. Of course, there were exceptions. Not every adventurer despised learning. Take Reverial Joe's elf, for instance. The high elf royal known for her grace and discipline, an adventurer Rose had once advised herself. There were also many in Orario who had graduated from the school district, already equipped with the knowledge and skills to survive the dungeon. Those adventurers rarely needed an advisor's help. Well, it's not like this is the first time I've taught him, but it is nice to have an adventurer who actually listens. Rose thought with a hint of satisfaction as her tail swayed slightly. Mr. Judas, Rose said, her gaze sweeping over him. I see you're not wearing any gear. Did the Loki Familia fail to provide you with one? Aside from the black gauntlet on his arm, Judas wore no armor, just a simple shirt, pants, and a pair of leather boots. If she didn't know better, Rose would have mistaken him for an ordinary city dweller, not an adventurer. I did check their armory, Judas replied calmly. But most of it was low-grade equipment. They wouldn't last long in the lower floors. Even if he wore them, their protection would be negligible for the depth he planned to explore. Then where do you plan to buy proper armor? Rose tapped a pen against her lips thoughtfully. Well, I'm planning to head to Babel today, Judas replied. You might think he could simply conjure some defensive magic to make up for his lack of armor. But Judas knew that relying on magic for everything, just for the sake of convenience, was a terrible habit to develop. He was aware of his greatest weakness, the imbalance between his mind and the strength of his spells. My mind pool, it's too lacking to keep up with the high mana consumption and overwhelming firepower of my spells. His mind wasn't limitless, and his magic couldn't possibly protect him forever. Even high-ranking or first-class adventurers wore some form of armor. They might have bodies tough enough to withstand devastating blows, but that didn't make them invincible. The dungeon never played fair. And for those who dared to underestimate its horrors, even a level 7 could end up swallowed whole. It's good that you didn't allow yourself to get blinded by your abilities and actually thought about buying protective gear, or else I wouldn't have permitted your descent to the lower floors," Rose said with a firm and approving tone. Seeing the look on her face, Judas knew his advisor wasn't lying. "I'll come with you," Rose said as she stood up. "Sorry?" Judas turned to her, puzzled. "I said I'm coming with you. Or do you not want me to?" Rose's sharp eyes met his directly. "I don't really mind, but don't you have work to do here at the guild?" "What are you talking about?" "Advising you is part of my work," she replied matter-of-factly, her wolf-like ears twitching. In truth, even her boss, the guild manager, Royman, had told her to take special care of him. "Besides, as far as I know, you've never been inside the Tower of Babel before, right?" Judas nodded. "Good. With my experience, I can guide you and recommend shops that sell quality equipment at fair prices." Hearing her reasoning, Judas was convinced. Rose pulled out a small notebook and a quill, quickly flipping to a blank page before jotting something down. "Since you mentioned that you dislike wearing robes or tunics like other mages, we can rule those out," she murmured, her quill gliding across the paper. "Let's see, you said you're a combat mage, a hybrid battlecaster, a living, moving artillery cannon." Her eyes flicked up briefly, then returned to her notes. "The armor that would suit you best should be lightweight, but without sacrificing too much mobility." She paused, tapping her quill thoughtfully. "And if we factor in your current budget?" After adventuring in the middle floors for a few days before getting ambushed by Freya, Judas had managed to collect a decent amount of Valis. "I wonder if that is enough though." Judas simply watched as his advisor muttered to herself, lost in calculation for nearly a full minute. Finally, she snapped her notebook shut. "Let's go." After writing down on a notebook, the two soon left the guild side by side. "Ha! Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Or is Rose walking around with an adventurer, a man, at that?" Nisha exclaimed with wide eyes. "What did you just say?" Hearing her friend's words, Ina turned her gaze toward the pair. Her mouth hung open slightly as she adjusted her glasses in disbelief. The two receptionists exchanged shocked looks, realizing they were seeing the same thing. And they weren't the only ones reacting. Other guild staff and adventurers nearby began whispering. "Is that Miss Rose? Walking together with a man? Who is he? How dare he get close to her? That's Judas Spade, the rising star everyone's been talking about lately. Why, oh, why? My Rose is being stolen away. It should have been me, not him." One adventurer with spiky hair dropped to his knees in despair, slamming his forearm against the ground. "With her looks, I knew Miss Rose was popular, but this reaction is a bit much," Judas thought, glancing at Rose, who seemed completely unfazed by the commotion happening around her. He had visited the guild enough times to know just how popular the receptionists were among adventurers. Every day, someone would confess their love or attempt to flirt with one of them, only to be swiftly and coldly rejected. And Rose, easily among the most beautiful and composed of them all, was no exception. "Just ignore them," she said flatly. Judas nodded once, following her advice. "Ack! Curse you, Judas Spade." He naturally ignored the faint cry of a heartbroken man echoing from behind. Chapter 64, Silence enters the stage. The Tower of Babel, the world's most famous landmark. A symbol of the City of Heroes, it had stood tall ever since the founding of Wario. Built to seal the dungeon and prevent monsters from escaping, the tower served as both a lid and a shield, protecting the surface world since ancient times. Now owned and maintained by the guild, it stood as humanity's watchtower over the abyss below. Babel boasted a total of 50 floors. The first 20 housed familia businesses, facilities, and currency exchanges. From the 4th to the 8th floor, every shop was owned by the Hephaestus familia, renowned for their craftsmanship. Above the 20th floor lay the private rooms, exclusive residences of Orario's most influential gods. To navigate such immense height, Babel was equipped with elevators, advanced technology that would have been impossible in the Middle Ages if not for divine knowledge of the gods. When Judas and Rose stepped out of the elevator, they were greeted by a bustling sight. Rows of glittering storefronts, the hum of adventurers chatting, and the clinking of metal on display. It's livelier than I expected. For Judas, who'd only been in Orario for a little over a week, this was his first time inside the colossal tower. "Follow me," Rose said, taking the lead as she guided him through the equipment and armor shops. Along the way, Judas couldn't help but glance at the displays they passed. That sword. 250 million? That spear. 170 million? That golden armor set. 300 million? What the hell? Why is everything so expensive? He felt dizzy just looking at the price tags. The 2 million valis he'd earned from his recent dungeon dives suddenly felt laughably small. For someone who'd never cared much about money, the reality of his situation hit him all at once. "Don't even bother looking at the high-end gear," Rose said, noticing the distress on his face. "We're not here for those. Equipment made by famous smiths tends to be overpriced. What we want are works from skilled smiths who haven't made a name for themselves yet. Their prices are much more reasonable." Judas nodded, following her deeper into the shopping district. Soon, the atmosphere shifted. A dagger for 300,000. A chest plate for 500,000. And that sword, only 100,000, yet it looks well made. Even though most of the items were designed for level 1 or level 2 adventurers, their quality was undeniable. "We can split up from here," Rose said. "Find whatever gear suits you best. I'll do some searching on my end as well. Let's meet up here in half an hour." "All right." Judas nodded before heading off on his own. "Excuse me," he called out to a nearby store owner. "Do you know where Wealth Kratzo's shop is?" The bearded dwarf turned, eyeing Judas for a moment before speaking. "If you're planning to buy one of his magic swords, don't bother. And besides," he said, pausing to scratch his beard, "the lad's probably in the dungeon right now." "Then do you at least know where his shop is?" Judas pressed. "Stubborn brat, aren't ya?" The dwarf sighed, shaking his head. "Fine. If you insist, turn left, his place should be right around that corner." "Thanks," Judas said, giving a short nod before walking off. There was a reason he was searching for the red-haired smith from the main cast. Beyond simply wanting to see his craftsmanship, Judas was intrigued by the man's bloodline, one that bore a direct connection to the spirits. Kratzo blood, a gift from an ancient spirit that once blessed Wealth's ancestor. He was using this visit as an opportunity to find the prideful blacksmith, all while checking out the shops around him in the process. After a few minutes asking other shopkeepers along the way, he finally stopped in front of a closed door. A small sigh escaped his lips. "So it's true," he muttered quietly, feeling disappointed. "I heard that there was someone snooping around looking for wealth, but I didn't think it was you." Just then, two familiar presences appeared behind him, one belonging to a seasoned adventurer, the other to a god. A first-class adventurer. He turned around, and his eyes widened slightly. Subaki Kalbrand and Goddess Hephaestus? Two of the most renowned figures in all of Orario's blacksmithing world stood before him. "Oh. Most adventurers call me by my alias, but I suppose that's fine," Subaki said with a teasing grin. "So tell me, why's Orario's newest rising star snooping around for one of our familia members?" "I'm just looking to buy some new gear," Judas replied. He noticed Hephaestus's gaze shift toward his hands. "That black gauntlet, is that Jarnglofer?" "Yeah," Judas said, glancing down at the worn but sturdy armor on his arm. It had scratches from his previous battles, but nothing too serious, not enough to rush for repairs. "What about it?" Hephaestus folded her arms, curiosity glinting in her eye. "To think that ended up in your possession. I'm guessing Astria's children gave it to you?" "That's right." Judas answered. Then a thought struck him. Wait, did you make this yourself, Lady Hephaestus? A weapon made by the goddess of smithing herself. Only a select number of individuals had the honor of owning one. Any weapon made by her were guaranteed to be top-notch. You guessed it, she said, nodding her head. Although that one's only a prototype. A prototype? Judas raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. If it's all right with you, Lady Hephaestus, he said after a pause. Could you show me the completed version? The two smiths exchanged a knowing glance before Tsubaki smirked. Interested, are you? Too bad. The materials were too rare and too costly, not to mention the effort it'd take to forge one. The project was scrapped years ago. Her words hit like a splash of cold water. Judas couldn't hide his disappointment. You said the materials were expensive, he asked, curious. How expensive are we talking? Hephaestus tapped her chin thoughtfully. Let's see. With the adamantite, orichalcum, rare materials and specially processed magic stones needed, plus the help of several alchemists for the final phase. She looked back at him and smiled faintly. You're looking at around 400 million valis, at minimum. Judas froze. His eyes twitched, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. 400 million, at minimum? He muttered, feeling his heart drop. Suddenly, his curiosity vanished completely. Ha ha ha. That look on your face. It's priceless. Tsubaki burst out laughing, her voice echoing boisterously through the corridor. Hephaestus, on the other hand, simply shook her head, clearly embarrassed by her followers' behavior. Judas spade. The goddess of smithing began, her calm voice cutting through the laughter. I take it this is your first time shopping inside Babel? Judas nodded silently. Then tell me. She continued with a gentle smile. What's your budget, and what kind of equipment are you looking for? Perhaps I can help you find something suitable. Her offer caught him off guard. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly, feeling somewhat out of place. After seeing all those ridiculous prices, I feel like a peasant who wandered into a royal boutique. Even so, he couldn't just refuse the kindness of one of Orario's most respected goddesses. Unlike the ever-mischievous Loki, Hephaestus exuded a calm, mature grace, serious, steady, and composed. 2 million, you say? She mused, resting her chin thoughtfully on her fingers. After a few moments of consideration, she led him to a display of armor sets, not high-end, but finely crafted and reliable. The lightweight armor before him could withstand blows from a second-class adventurer. It wasn't as good as his previous gear, but more than adequate for now. I'll take it, Judas said without hesitation. For 1.5 million valis, the set was a bargain. He handed over the money and received the armor, neatly packed in a carrier bag. Good choice. Tsubaki grinned, patting his back with enough force to make him stumble slightly. Now go tear it up in the dungeon, rookie. After thanking the two smithing legends, Judas left and soon spotted Rose waiting nearby, carrying what looked like a folded piece of fabric. Oh. Seems your little trip was a success after all, Rose remarked, her eyes flicking toward the bag in his hands. I had some help, Judas replied before his gaze shifted to the cloth she held. What about you? Did you buy that? I know you said you dislike robes and tunics, Rose said softly, holding it out to him. Which is why I got you this. He took the garment from her hands and examined it. An undershirt? Not just any undershirt, she corrected, a faint smile forming on her lips. It's a protective cloth woven by special materials. Judas blinked. Wait, you bought this for me? Why? He wasn't focused on the shirt's properties, but rather on her. Think of it as a gesture of goodwill, she said, brushing off the question. I can't possibly let a lady pay for me. But before he could finish, Rose stepped closer and placed her finger gently against his lips. You can keep it. she said quietly, her golden eyes meeting his. "Whenever you go down into the dungeon, just promise me you'll always come back alive." Judas froze. The concern in her eyes was real, not the kind that came from obligation as an advisor, but from the heart. "All right. I promise." By the time they exited Babel, it was already 9:45. "Heading to meet Elise and the others at the Stardust Garden?" Rose asked as they walked side by side down the street. "Yeah, I don't want to be late." The words died in his throat. He felt it. A powerful presence drawing near. He turned around. And there she was. Eyes of two colors. One green, one gray. Locked squarely onto him amidst the crowded street. "I finally found you, Judas Spade." Her voice was soft, feminine, yet it carried the chill of a devil's whisper. Chapter 65, The Venerated One vs. Silence Part 1. A beautiful, fair-skinned woman with silver hair stood before him, dressed in a dark, gothic dress that reached down to her feet. Her presence was overwhelming. Her heterochromatic eyes bore into him with unsettling intensity, as if she were inspecting someone who owed her a debt. Judas. Even a normal person like Rose felt something was off and couldn't help but stare at her nervously. "Miss Rose, stay behind me," he whispered as he stepped in front of her. A bead of sweat trickled down his face and fell to the floor. "Isn't she that insanely strong woman who arrived with Belle?" This was only the second time they had met, yet Judas could already tell she was dangerous. His instincts, they were screaming warnings at him. Level 7. Someone as monstrous as Otter. At least on par, or perhaps even stronger, than the strongest adventurer in Orario, which many considered as the objective truth. "I finally got to see you. And I see that the Guild Wolf girl is here as well," Althea said, her soft smile laced with something far less warm. "You're the child who rode the carriage with me and my niece, aren't you? It's nice to see you again." "The pleasure is all mine, ma'am," Judas replied, giving a respectful nod. "Why are you so nervous?" "It's not like I'm going to kill you or anything," Althea said, her smile never faltering. That smile, it doesn't suit her at all. Judas felt something off about the way she smiled, it was fake. No. It was as if she were forcing herself to smile. "How is Belle doing?" She should have joined a familia and started her adventuring journey by now. He tried to engage in small talk, attempting to gauge her intentions. "Oh, my useless niece?" "She's doing fine, and her training is coming along nicely. But it seems like she isn't doing as well as you, despite having similar starting points." "Am I right, Silent Saint?" Silent Saint, that was the unofficial alias the people of Orario had given him after he revealed his miraculous healing magic. Along with the Savior, Judas now bore two unofficial nicknames that would probably stay until the gods themselves awarded him an official one during the Donatus. "A Donatus hasn't even been held yet, and I'm already getting nicknames left and right," Judas thought as he stared at the woman, who now had her eyes closed. "My ears, enhanced by the fauna, can't even pick up a heartbeat or the sound of her breathing. Even when she's this close, it's as if this woman hates noise itself." No matter how much he tried to pry, he was completely unable to read the woman before him. "I'm embarrassed to hear your praise," Judas replied. "It was a nice conversation, but I have to go now. My companions are waiting for me." Judas and Rose turned to leave, but before he could take another step. "Where are you going?" "I'm not done yet." Althea's hand shot out and grabbed his arm, her fingers like iron clamps locking him in place. Judas froze, then tried to pull away, yet her grip didn't budge. "Not even an inch." "Hey, let go. I don't think I have any business with you." His voice stayed calm, but his body tensed as he reinforced himself to the limit with his magic, body reinforcement. "Oh? Did you get stronger? I sensed movement of magic power inside your body, a magic that boosts your status, perhaps?" Althea commented in a casual tone. Realizing this was going nowhere, Judas cast every single one of his strengthening spells, amplifying his stats to level 4. "That's better," but not enough, Althea said as her grip tightened further. Cracks began to form on the paved ground beneath his feet. Still nothing? Judas' heart pounded as a bead of sweat ran down his temple. Her grip felt immovable, as if he were trying to break free from chains bolted to the earth itself. It's useless, Althea said flatly. Judas! The sound of Rose screaming reached his ears. Then, the world blurred. Before he could react, the ground vanished beneath him. The wind howled past his ears. Then came the impact. Crash! Judas' back slammed into cold stone, spiderweb-like cracks spreading across the wall behind him. The shock rattled his bones, but he staggered back to his feet. Shit! He glanced around, and realized he was standing atop Orario's city wall. Did I just get thrown all the way here? They had been in the middle of town seconds ago. What do you want? He demanded, turning toward Althea. She stood a few feet away, her face calm, serene, yet cold enough to freeze the air around her. No response. The air shifted. A magic circle flared beneath Judas, its pressure so suffocating that the stone beneath his feet cracked and splintered outward. Yet Althea stood still, unshaken, her gaze locked onto him like a predator toying with its prey. What is she planning? She stood completely still, just quietly observing, as if waiting for him to make a move. Still not talking? Judas ran out of patience and fired a deadly beam of light toward her. A searing laser that evaporated everything in its path. Gone? Judas blinked. Althea had vanished from where she stood. My, what an impressive casting speed. Even faster than mine. Completely instantaneous. Who taught you? A chill crawled down his spine as her voice whispered from behind him. Judas spun, unleashing a roundhouse kick aimed at her head. The force tore through the air with a violent gust. It hit. Feeling the impact on his leg, Judas assumed he'd landed a direct hit. But it was an illusion. That kick. I'll give it 9 points. He realized Althea had casually caught his leg, her expression still calm and indifferent. Out of 10? Judas asked with a nervous smile. No, out of 100. She said, then hurled him across the distance using his leg. I see. I was trying to be gentle, but it seems that approach isn't working. I should have just stuck to my usual methods. She added as she saw him emerge from the rubble. Gentle? Are you kidding me? Judas barked in disbelief. After being dragged across Orario like a ragdoll, her words felt almost insulting. For the first time, Althea's face twisted slightly, her frown showing a hint of irritation. Noisy. The air shifted violently. An invisible force slammed into Judas' chest like a massive weight. His instincts screamed at him. Not to fight. Not to counter. But to run. What is this? He had never felt anything like it. Not against the Juggernaut, not against the Freya executives, not even when he encountered situations when death had seemed certain. Judas' gaze snapped to Althea's glowing hand, raw power gathering in her palm like a coiled serpent ready to strike. The sheer pressure made his bones tremble. Gospel. The chant was brief, a spell of devastating force that attacked with walls of sound. Simple, yet overwhelming. Entire squads of elite adventurers had crumbled before it. Judas knew one thing. He couldn't afford to hold back. Full power. His body flared with light as he pushed, body reinforcement, beyond its safe limit. Wrath of the Celestial Titan. Blue lightning danced around him. The two forces collided, and the resulting explosion created a giant crack that nearly split the city wall in half. Then came the thunderous shockwave, reverberating throughout Orario, shattering nearby windows, loud enough for everyone in the city to hear. Judas! Rose's eyes widened in horror as she watched the scene, her scream drowned out by the panicked cries of the crowd around her. Chapter 66, The Venerated 1 vs. Silence Part 2. What's happening over there? The clash between Judas and Althea had drawn the attention of the entire city. There's a huge commotion by the city walls. At the Stardust Garden, Elise leapt onto the rooftop for a better view. When the smoke cleared, the sight before them left everyone frozen in disbelief. And they weren't alone. The entire city seemed to hold its breath. For a few seconds, silence reigned, until the streets erupted with frantic cries. By the gods, the city wall that stood solid for over 1,000 years. A massive, lightning-shaped fracture tore through the concrete barrier, from the top, all the way to the base. First the dungeon incident, and now this? What's happening to Ororio? As panic spread through the crowd, Elise and the others exchanged tense glances. What do you think, Captain? Should we check it out, or try to calm the masses first? Lyra asked, turning toward her red-haired leader. But before Elise could respond. Elise! Everyone! Help! Rose's panicked voice rang through the air, forcing all eyes toward her. Rose? What's the matter? Why that grim look? Elise asked, landing before her with visible concern. Judas, please. Help him. Their eyes widened at her plea. In the next instant, Elise vanished, bolting toward the source of the destruction. I swear, that boy's always at the center of trouble lately. Kaguya muttered, shaking her head as she and Lyra took off after her. Meanwhile, Judas lay sprawled on the ground, blood trickling from his nose, ears, and eyes. His vision blurred, his sense of balance destroyed. Every attempt to push himself upright ended in failure. The aftermath replayed in his mind. Ugh! When their attacks collided, his eardrums had ruptured instantly, and his lightning was torn asunder by the massive beams of sound. His magic had been completely obliterated by Althea's power, like glass shattering beneath a hammer. Hoof! Steady footsteps echoed in his ears, low, deliberate, like a predator closing in on wounded prey. Despite his battered state, Judas could feel her presence. Still conscious after taking my attack? Impressive. But this is far from enough, show me more of what you can do. Althea stopped right in front of him, gazing down at his broken form. Then her eyes narrowed. She could feel it, a vast amount of magic power gathering all around the area. What are you? Her voice faltered for a moment. Judas' bloodied face twisted into a grin. A series of magic circles surrounded her, creating a perimeter that covered all sides. Too late. He made a gun gesture with his fingers and mimed a shot. Dozens of elemental spells fired all at once. Magical energy poured forth in a relentless torrent, devouring everything in its path. The air shook around them as if space itself trembled violently. Everyone, get out of here! This is a war zone. People scattered in panic, fleeing the surge of magical devastation that tore through the streets. The tremors could be felt even from the other side of the city. At that moment, the entire city of Ororio stood still, all eyes fixed on the blinding, colorful lights. Judas. From the Twilight Manor, Loki muttered his name with worry. The pressure radiating from Judas' spells could be felt even here. Cracks spiderwebbed across her window, yet her focus never wavered from the radiant glow dominating the skyline. Damn it, Finn, when are you coming back? She growled in frustration. Somehow, Judas always found a way to draw chaos to himself. Elise, leaping across rooftops, halted as the intense heat forced her back. Elise, what's the situation? The red-haired captain of the Estria Familia turned to see Ryu and several waitresses from the tavern appear beside her. Judas is in trouble, Elise said grimly, her eyes reflecting the dazzling light. If he's been pushed this far, his opponent must be terrifying. Lyra muttered, frowning. Is it the Freya Familia again? Kaguya asked with a scowl. It's not Freya, that lightning-shaped burst definitely belongs to Judas, but the other one. I'm pretty sure that sound-based magic doesn't belong to any of her executives. Elise concluded, not a hint of doubt in her voice. Lyra and the rest, make sure to evacuate the citizens nearby. Lion, Kaguya, and I will go assist him. Elise quickly gave out orders, showing her capabilities as a captain. The others nodded and sprang into action. With that, the figures vanished from the rooftops in a blur. Meanwhile, Judas, standing near the epicenter of the magical outburst, had already begun healing himself as the magic's intensity started to fade. Surely, that had to do some damage, right? Then a calm voice cut through his thoughts. Ataraxia. From the settling debris, she emerged. Judas' heart sank as he saw the faint glow surrounding her body. Chunks of protective light flickered and crumbled from her frame, evidence that his attack had cracked her defense, but it was not enough to damage my Silentium Eden. Althea murmured, brushing dust from her dress. There have only been a handful who've managed to do that. Silentium Eden, a super short-chant enchantment that cloaked Althea in magic-negating armor. A spell that would make any mage feel despair. I'll give you 30 points for that attack. Despite its ability to nullify external magic, the true nature of her spell lay in its capacity to greatly diminish her own power. But instead of armor, it was rather a seal, a restraint to keep her own noise within herself. You've got to be kidding me. Judas clenched his fists as he saw through the nature of her magic at a glance. Ha! Her expression changed. It was then he realized something. The cold-faced woman now wore a serene expression. If it is you, it is possible. Althea spoke with an unreadable face. What are you talking about? Judas asked as he secretly gathered magic power for another spell. I thought this world was doomed. Althea said, her voice low and firm. But now that I see you, and my niece, I finally see a glimmer of hope. What I once deemed impossible, I can finally see a scenario where it might be achieved. Judas saw it firsthand. The stone-faced warrior from before was nowhere to be found. No. Don't let your guard down for 1 second. He reminded himself and stayed alert. Althea noticed the wariness in his eyes and exhaled softly. She looked toward the city with an almost nostalgic gaze. Hope, what a nice word. She carried a deep regret, one that stemmed from the failed battle against the one-eyed black dragon. The previous generation of Aurario's adventurers had proven no match. With the fall of the Zeus and Hera Familia, the burden now rested on the current generation. Having witnessed its power firsthand, she'd spent years agonizing over what felt like the inevitable end of the mortal world. After hearing rumors of Judas' feats, she had to see for herself if there was someone capable of succeeding where they had failed. I will make you my disciple. She spoke as if her words were absolute, leaving no room for argument. Ha! Judas blinked in confusion. The suffocating tension had suddenly vanished. Althea turned her head toward the distance. Looks like we have company. Her gaze shifted back to Judas, her calm yet commanding presence returning. Tomorrow, we begin training at the break of dawn. Don't keep me waiting. She paused for a moment before adding coldly. Oh, and if you dare be late by even a second and tell anyone about me, I'll break every single bone in your body. With that, her figure blurred and vanished. Judas stood frozen until hurried footsteps broke the silence. Elise, Kagaya, and Ryu arrived moments later, their faces painted with worry. Judas, are you all right? The sight of their concern finally made him relax. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a bit roughed up, that's all. Elise knelt beside him, wiping the blood from his face with her sleeve. No, a heal. Ryu murmured, activating her healing magic. Mr. Spade. She said seriously, though warmth lingered in her voice. I can't help but wonder if you're some kind of living trouble magnet. Ha! I'm wondering that myself. Judas chuckled weakly before lowering himself to the ground. As he overlooked the city, he felt his headache worsen. The sight of panicked citizens and the massive fracture in Aurario's ancient city walls was probably going to bite him in the butt. Sai, of course it's you. Do you mind telling us what happened? Judas' eyes shifted as Shakti arrived, several members of the Ganesha Familia flanking her. She looks tired of having to deal with my crap constantly. Judas smiled awkwardly, knowing he was in for a long day. Chapter 67. The Monster of Talent. Mr. Spade, I'm so sorry. I was supposed to protect you, and yet. Ryu's voice faltered. She couldn't finish her words as her eyes fell on him, bruised, battered, and covered in dried blood. Don't worry, Ryu. I'm fine. Judas said softly, forcing a reassuring smile. Besides, who could have expected someone to attack right in the middle of the city? Thanks to his passive healing ability and Ryu's Noah heal, his injuries had already vanished. Now I just need new clothes, he thought, glancing at his tattered outfit. He looked more like a vagrant than an adventurer. Now, don't be so gloomy, Lion. Let's treat this slip-up as a lesson, Elise said cheerfully. As always, she found light even in dark situations. That's a nice mindset, Elise, Shakti said, stepping forward. But not everyone has a spirit as strong as yours. Her eyes swept toward the massive crack running through the city wall. A wound left behind by the battle. Thanks to the Ganesha Familia and other groups, order had been restored pretty quickly. But unease still lingered in the hearts of the citizens. Some whispered that today's event was a terrorist attack. Others doubted whether Orario's adventurers were truly capable of keeping them safe. Rumors spread quickly, claims that Evolus had returned, and with it, fears that the dark age of Orario was about to begin anew. It's hard to believe anyone other than Otter could have done this, Loki murmured, eyes narrowing as she surveyed the destruction. She turned toward Judas. All right, spill it. Who attacked you this time? All eyes turned to him. Judas exhaled quietly. There was no point in hiding the truth. Her name is Althea. He said it without hesitation. As for the threat she had given him earlier, he couldn't care less. Break all my bones? He had endured far worse pain before. She wore a black, Gothic-style dress, silver hair, and though she kept her eyes closed most of the time, one of her defining traits was her heterochromatic eyes. The moment those words left his lips, silence fell. Everyone froze, as if struck by lightning. What? Are you serious? Even the usually composed Shakti looked shaken. Goddess Loki, she said, her voice tense. He's not lying, Loki muttered, clicking her tongue in frustration. But, how is that possible? Shakti pressed, disbelief heavy in her tone. Didn't she die 15 years ago, when the Zeus and Hera Familias failed to defeat the one-eyed black dragon? How the hell should I know? Loki snapped, irritation seeping through her voice. If she's alive, then could there be others? Survivors from those legendary Familias? Shakti said in a low voice. No. Loki replied immediately, shaking her head. At most, maybe two. If there were more, there's no way they could have stayed hidden for this long. You two seem to know her well, Judas interjected, raising a brow. Mind filling me in? The two exchanged uneasy glances before Loki finally sighed, crossing her arms. Kid, I don't know how you're still standing after facing her. But tell me, do you know who the Hera Familia were? I've heard of them, Judas said. Along with the Zeus Familia, they fell after their battle against the one-eyed black dragon. He wasn't just recalling history, he knew this from both stories and records. Enough to piece together the rough timeline of Orario's golden age. So, a member of the Hera Familia is still alive? Belle's grandfather is Zeus, could that be why that woman is by Belle's side? If Zeus and Hera were married in Greek mythology, does that hold true here as well? He thought with narrowed eyes. It's good that you know, Loki said with a slow nod. But that woman you fought, she wasn't just some member of the Hera Familia. Her expression darkened. Judas, do you know who currently holds the highest level in Orario? Otter, the warlord of the Freya Familia, a level 7. Judas answered without hesitation. In the current era of the mortal world, at least in this generation. Level 7 was the highest milestone ever achieved. Excluding Leon, who was from the school district, Otter stood alone at the top as the sole level 7 in Orario.
That woman. She's also a level 7, isn't she?
Judas began, his expression tightening. His guess from earlier was spot on.
Loki nodded. She's not just a level 7. The gods gave her the alias Silence, but there's another name she's infamous for.
She paused for dramatic effect. The monster of calamitous talent.
Meanwhile. Hey, oh mother, goddess, I'm back.
Look how much money I got from today's dungeon dive. Belle burst through the abandoned church doors, proudly shaking a pouch of coins with a bright smile. Althea, lounging on the couch with a book in hand, shot her an irritated glare.
Without warning, she smacked Belle on the head. Ow. That hurts. What did I do wrong?
Belle rubbed the growing bump on her head, her eyes glistening with tears. I told you to stop being so noisy.
How many times do I have to say it before you understand?
Althea's sharp tone, and the cold aura radiating from her, made Belle instinctively take a step back.
Hey! Quit hitting Belle on the head.
Hestia stepped forward, spreading her arms protectively.
Do you want to take her place, dear goddess? Althea's tone was casual, but the threat was real. Deity or not, her attitude never wavered. Hestia immediately backed off, sweating bullets. Sorry, Belle. Althea's just too scary. Goddess Hestia, you traitor! Belle cried dramatically. Oof.
Althea lost interest and returned to her book, leaving Belle and Hestia to sigh in relief.
By the way.
Hestia began, changing the subject.
Did you see what happened outside? There's a huge crack in the east wall. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. Althea's fingers froze on her book for just a moment before she resumed flipping the pages. Everyone's been talking about it.
I was in the dungeon at the time, but I still felt the tremors all the way down to the 4th floor.
It was terrifying.
Belle said, shivering at the memory.
Orario isn't safe these days. Hestia added grimly. Incidents are happening left and right.
You need to be careful, Belle. Belle nodded, but her gaze shifted toward Althea, suspicion creeping into her eyes.
Hey, why do I get the feeling you had something to do with today's incident?
Althea's head jerked slightly, but her face remained calm.
It's just your imagination, she said coldly. And mind your own business. Or do you want me to increase the intensity of your training? No. Anything but that. Belle paled, waving her hands frantically.
Be prepared for tomorrow, Althea said, turning another page.
You might be getting a new training partner soon. Huh? What do you mean? Althea didn't answer, her focus returning to her book. Belle. Judas.
I'm sorry, but I'm entrusting the fate of this world to the both of you.
If neither of you can surpass me. If neither of you can overcome what we couldn't, then Orario, no, the entire mortal world, has no future.
A sharp glint flickered in her eyes, cold and resolute.
Chapter 68, Althea's Training.
It was very early in the morning, the sun had yet to rise.
Judas Spade, washing his face, looked up at the mirror and stared at his reflection. Just how monstrous do you have to be to earn the title Monster of Talent?
That was how the gods and adventurers once described her.
Back during the reign of Zeus and Hera.
Even Ace, the daughter of a spirit whose fame and skill were known across the world, had never received that title. And Belle from the original anime, who shattered countless records, hadn't been given that honor either. His mind drifted back to the conversation he'd had with Loki the previous night.
You know, kid, I'm starting to think locking you up in the mansion might not be such a bad idea. Loki muttered. Judas shot her an incredulous look. Don't look at me like that, she said flatly. Who's the one going around causing trouble everywhere? You? Afraid of trouble? The goddess of mischief?
His eyes widened into full circles. Those were the last words he thought he'd ever hear from someone like Loki.
Don't talk. Her expression darkened. Because of you, I might not be able to drink anything for a while.
A gloomy aura radiated from her, and Judas immediately understood.
Ah. I see.
With the destruction on the city wall, the guild would no doubt hold the Loki Familia partially responsible. They walked in silence for a while before Judas spoke again.
About the plan we discussed earlier.
We'll have to wait for Finn and the others to return before putting anything into motion.
Loki replied. Until then, go ahead and play disciple and master with silence. The last thing we want is for her to go on another rampage.
She paused, then smirked slightly.
Besides, it might actually be good for you. Having a level 7 as your master might be exactly what you need.
When Judas opened his eyes, he grabbed a towel and dried his face.
A master, huh?
Although she says that, why do I get the feeling that training with that woman is just getting beaten up over and over again? Still, he couldn't deny that training with Althea had its benefits. The amount of high-quality excelia he could rack up just from sparring with her,
Judas thought, was comparable to facing a floor boss or even a monster Rex.
After putting on a fresh set of clothes, he nodded once at his reflection and left the Twilight Manor. The morning air was cold and still, yet heavier than usual. The eastern section of Orario's wall, once a proud symbol of the city's strength, now bore a jagged scar. The cracks looked as though the whole structure might crumble at the lightest touch. Guards patrolled the area, keeping civilians at bay as repair crews began their work. A lone figure sat quietly atop the wall, one leg propped up, the other dangling off the edge. She never specified where we'd meet.
I guess I have no choice but to come back here.
He'd considered meeting at the abandoned church where Belle and Althea lived, but that would raise too many questions. There was no reason he should know that place existed. Since Althea had told him nothing, he assumed she meant for them to meet at the same place where they had fought. That was when he sensed two presences approaching. Strangely, though, he only heard the footsteps of one person.
She's here.
He never questioned why that woman made no sound when she moved, only the identity of the person she'd brought with her. Judas turned his head slightly and caught sight of a familiar silver-haired figure.
Althea stood at the edge of the wall, watching him.
Without a word, she gestured to someone behind her.
"Ha!" Belle muttered, stepping forward hesitantly.
She squinted up at Judas, disbelief crossing her face.
"Wait, no way. Is that Mr. J. Judas?"
Belle's breath hitched, her words stumbled as her face turned red. Judas Spade, the person she admired, was right there. The man who single-handedly resolved the dungeon disaster, and the one who shattered the record for the fastest rank-up in history.
And now,
the very figure everyone in the city was talking about was sitting right there, staring at her.
"Ah, he's looking at me."
She fidgeted and clutched the hem of her dress.
"What am I doing? Stop shaking."
She mustered the courage to glance up at him, but, like a startled animal, her gaze snapped back to the ground.
"He's going to think I'm weird."
Her hands grew clammy as she silently screamed at herself in panic.
Overcome with embarrassment, Belle turned around and tried to run away. "Where do you think you're going?"
Her aunt's hand landed on her shoulder like an iron clamp before she could take a single step.
I have to go to the bathroom," Belle blurted out, thinking up an excuse on the spot.
Althea's eyes narrowed as she stared straight into Belle's red ones.
"No, you don't.
Stop making excuses to skip training, or I'll beat the living crap out of you." Her cold tone made Belle sweat even more.
"Why yes, mother."
Knowing Althea's Spartan methods, she understood that if she resisted any further, things wouldn't end well.
"That boy over there, from now on, he'll be your training partner," Althea said as Judas walked up to them. "Hello, nice to see you again, Miss Belle."
He greeted her with a faint smile.
He remembered my name?
Belle's heart pounded even faster.
"And nice to see you again as well,"
she replied, her voice cracking at the end. She flinched, feeling as though she'd just been possessed by the spirit of awkwardness. Come on, Belle, stop being such a nervous mess. She mentally scolded herself, then slapped both her cheeks, leaving a visible imprint on them.
It's an honor to be training with you, Mr. Judas,
she said, bowing deeply after a deep breath. Judas blinked, puzzled, clearly trying to make sense of why Belle had just smacked herself.
Yeah. We may be from different familias, but I hope we can work well together, he said, offering her his hand. Belle's eyes widened. Realizing he was offering a handshake, she grabbed his hand with both of hers and shook it frantically. Okay, that's enough introductions. You're getting too noisy,
Althea cut in sharply, her gaze now fixed on Judas.
Now then, let's start today's training, my dear disciple. Chapter 69, Relentless Training.
Before we start,
my new disciple, I want you to tell me the truth.
Althea spoke with her eyes still closed.
You ignored my warning and told Loki and the others about me, didn't you?
Her voice suddenly turned cold, and the temperature around them seemed to drop.
Belle noticed the chilling atmosphere surrounding her aunt and quickly hid behind Judas. Judas, meanwhile, simply stared back.
He didn't flinch. From the start, he never feared her. An unyielding fighting spirit that never bends or bows to the strong. You'll fight anyone, even knowing they're stronger than you.
The gloomy aura around Althea vanished, replaced by a faint nod of approval, though her expression remained neutral.
However, from your eyes, I can see it, that self-destructive spark burning beneath the surface. That habit of yours, the way you throw yourself into danger without hesitation, as if you're trying to prove something. Or perhaps, punish yourself. If you don't change, those same flames that drive you forward will one day consume you. And when that happens, you won't die in glory, you'll simply burn out, long before you ever reach the strength you're meant to have. Althea opened her eyes, as if staring straight into his soul. Judas' eyes widened at her words. He was shaken to the core, she had seen right through him.
It seems you're already aware of this.
Looks like you've already paid the price for your recklessness,
Althea muttered, noticing his reaction. Maybe I was wrong to expect more from you.
Judas stared at her for a moment before speaking. What are you getting at? He tried to hide it, but his composure was nearly shaken. But the silver-haired woman didn't answer. Before he could react, Althea vanished from sight.
His instincts kicked in.
Judas barely managed to dodge a fist aimed straight at his ribs. The air pressure alone from her punch shattered a section of the wall behind him.
We're starting already?
Judas asked, keeping his eyes locked on his so-called master as he raised his guard.
Why are you crying about it? In battle, would an enemy ever warn you before turning you into a corpse?
Her words cut like a blade, scolding him for such a foolish question.
First day of training, try to survive.
Leaving those words behind, Althea's figure faded into a blur.
Each punch and kick felt like an explosion as Judas desperately dodged and blocked.
Belle, watching from the sidelines, clasped her hands together and started praying.
Mr. Judas, please live.
Having experienced firsthand how brutal her aunt's teaching methods were, Belle silently begged the gods in heaven for Judas' survival.
This bitch,
Judas thought with a crooked smile as he looked down at the bruises spreading across his body.
Were you thinking something rude about me just now?
Althea suddenly appeared before him, her fist flying toward his stomach. Judas tried to move, but it was pointless, her speed surpassed anything he could perceive.
You're slow.
Her fist connected, knocking the breath from his lungs. Judas clutched his stomach, gritting his teeth in pain.
Fortunately, I didn't have breakfast before coming here.
Smoke began to rise from his body as his wounds started to heal.
That's a useful ability you have, a self-healing skill? Good. That means I can train you a little longer. Althea said as she looked down at his kneeling form, watching the purple and black bruises fade from his skin. Are all first-class adventurers a bunch of sadistic bastards or something?
The moment she stepped back into striking distance, Judas spun on his heel and lashed out with a roundhouse kick. Althea merely stepped aside, dodging it with minimal effort. Your close combat ability is decent. But you're still a beginner who's just learned how to walk," she commented before unleashing a flurry of strikes. A kick to the midsection that shattered his ribs. A punch to the face that broke his nose. A strike to the shin that nearly made him scream in pain. Althea was relentless with her attacks. A one-sided beatdown. If anyone else had witnessed this scene, they would have thought Althea bore some kind of blood feud against Judas. "Get up!" Althea's cold voice cut through the air as Judas lay on the ground in agony, gasping for breath. "Do you think the dungeon would give you time to rest? By now, a pack of monsters would have spawned and eaten you alive." She spoke before kicking him while he was still crawling across the floor. "I'm starting to think you just want to beat me up." Judas barked, forcing himself upright, glaring at her defiantly. "Disrespectful," she muttered coldly before her figure blurred. "That's not how you talk to your master." With surgical precision, Althea grabbed his arm, twisted her body, and slammed him face-first into the ground. Crack! A sharp pain shot through Judas' shoulder. He tried to stand, but Althea stomped him back down, his face grinding against the concrete once more. "Other than fixing that self-destructive habit of yours," Althea's voice loomed over him, "your close combat skills need more refining. It seems that I have a lot of work to do." Judas pushed himself up, spitting blood onto the ground. His vision blurred from pain, yet he refused to yield. "Again." Althea paused. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes, approval, perhaps? Expectation? "All right," she muttered softly. "Again." What followed was nothing short of a brutal, one-sided beatdown. Every strike Judas attempted was countered. Every move, every mistake, was punished. His legs trembled, his arms hung heavy as lead, yet Althea refused to stop. After nearly an hour of enduring her merciless training, Judas collapsed onto his back, chest heaving. "That's it for today. You may rest." Those words marked the end of the torture, but Judas knew more days like this awaited him. His body felt like it was on fire, yet somehow. He smiled, though faintly. It hurt, every fiber of muscle in his body ached, but Judas was a training maniac who loved the thrill of growth. Althea noticed this, and the edges of her lips curled ever so slightly. "I didn't even tell him not to use his magic, looks like he understood the assignment immediately." To maximize his growth, he deliberately handicapped himself by fighting without relying on his spells. Yes. Judas had been fighting with a level 2 status this entire time. Althea turned to Belle, who had been quietly watching the sparring session. "You'll spar against each other after he recovers. Also, I'm sure you already know this, but using magic is forbidden." She stared at Judas in particular. "That would defeat the whole purpose of your spar. I want to see how well you two adapt to each other's fighting styles," Althea ordered. But. Belle stammered, earning a vicious glare from her aunt. "Ma'am, yes ma'am." Belle straightened her posture instinctively. Althea's gaze shifted back to Judas, still sprawled on the ground, bruised and battered. Smoke rose steadily from his body as his healing ability worked overtime. "You're not half bad, but you still have a long way to go," Althea said at last. It was probably the only bit of praise he'd hear from her for a long time. Chapter 70, The Venerated One vs. Belle Crannel Part 1. After resting for half a minute, Judas could finally move without feeling pain echoing through his body. "Mr. Judas, are you all right?" Belle ran up to him, her voice laced with concern. Her aura of purity and warmth stood in complete contrast to Althea's cold and violent demeanor. How are these two even related? Judas couldn't help but wonder. For Belle to remain this kind despite being raised by someone as extreme as Althea was a miracle in itself. Or maybe this is just who Belle is, even in an alternate universe. Brushing off the dirt from his clothes, Judas stood and looked at Belle. "I'm fine. And from now on, you can drop the mister, just call me Judas." Belle's eyes lit up. "Then, you can call me Belle as well." Her cheeks reddened as she smiled. A pure, bright smile.
All right, fair enough. Belle. Judas nodded.
Watching their exchange, Althea remained silent for a moment before stepping closer.
Belle, ready your weapons.
And you, my disciple, get in position. I'll be keeping a careful eye on both of your performances. Althea spoke with her arms crossed.
I'm using real weapons?
Belle asked with a puzzled look on her face. Stop asking stupid questions, or I'll beat you. The reply was brief and cold. Hearing that, Belle straightened up, her nervousness evident.
Why yes, ma'am.
Her hands reached toward her waist, gripping the hilts of her daggers. For your sparring match today, I'm adding a condition, Althea said. Both Judas and Belle turned to her with raised brows.
What is it?
Judas asked curiously. If my niece manages to land a single hit, she wins. Her calm tone made Belle freeze for a moment before turning to her in disbelief.
Mother, what do you mean by that? Have some faith in me, will you?
Belle's voice carried both frustration and hurt. She knew Judas was stronger her, but hearing her own relative set those terms stung. It sounded as if Althea didn't believe in her at all. Judas, however, understood it differently. He immediately grasped the unspoken meaning behind Althea's words. Just from the few times he'd interacted with her, he already knew what kind of person Althea was.
On one hand, she set the condition to make things fair.
But at the same time, she cleverly turned it into a trial for both Belle and me to overcome.
Which meant one thing.
Even if that chance is small, she believes Belle is capable of landing a hit on me. It was surprising, and almost absurd. Judas Spade, a level 2 adventurer, a full level higher than Belle. Back when he was still level 1, his stats had reached the realm of EX. Even now, he possesses enough feats and stats to qualify for yet another level up. Even without using magic, it should have been unthinkable for a beginner like Belle to pose any challenge. Just landing a scratch should be impossible. But when he looked at her, flustered yet determined, he remembered the time she fought against the Soma Familia and nearly wiped them out on her own.
Back then, he didn't think much of it.
He'd simply dismissed it as plot armor, the kind of mysterious power every protagonist seemed to have. Is she really that skilled?
To the point that Althea believes she could land a hit on me? He frowned.
Yet he knew that for someone of Althea's caliber, her judgment was almost never wrong. Judas, please take care of me. Belle's voice had changed. She took her stance, twin daggers glinting in her hands. And then, her aura shifted. The nervousness in her eyes vanished, replaced by sharp focus.
Ha!
Judas's eyes widened slightly. That sudden change in demeanor caught him off guard. He could feel it. The presence of a warrior, something eerily reminiscent of Althea herself. It was as if Belle had become a smaller, softer version of her aunt. Years of training and trials were etched into her body. Even before the fight began, Judas could see it, the calluses on her hands, the steady rhythm of her breathing, and the lack of any opening in her stance.
I see.
A faint smile tugged at his lips. They are related after all. This was a different Belle Cranel. One shaped, hardened, and raised by the silence of the Hera Familia.
Let's have a good match, Belle,
Judas said as he took his stance.
A moment of silence passed.
A lone bird flew overhead, cutting across the sky before disappearing into the distance. After sizing each other up for a few seconds.
Now!
They rushed forward at the same time. Both were quick on their feet, but it was clear that Judas was faster. By the time Belle took her third step, he was already in front of her. But she had anticipated this. Her dagger swung forward in advance, slashing through the air.
Judas raised his arm, blocking the attack with his gauntlet. The sharp clang of metal echoed between them. Unfazed, Belle crouched low.
Her next strike came sweeping upward, followed by a feint to the side, her daggers flashing like silver streaks.
Clang!
Judas deflected both attacks with a single sweep of his arm, the gauntlet ringing sharply as steel met steel. He countered with a short jab, forcing Belle to twist away, her boots skidding across the floor.
Good reaction time,
he said calmly, watching her regain her balance. Belle exhaled sharply and charged again. Her movements were relentless, daggers dancing in rapid arcs as she aimed for his blind spots. Judas blocked, parried, and sidestepped each strike with effortless precision, his calm expression betraying the storm of motion around him.
A sudden spin. Belle's heel sliced through the air, followed by twin blades aiming for his ribs. Judas caught both strikes mid-flow, locking her wrists between his gauntlets.
Sparks flickered where metal scraped against metal. Belle grit her teeth, pushing back with all her strength, but Judas twisted, disarming her with a smooth motion that sent one dagger flying into the ground.
Oh no!
Without taking her eyes off him, Belle jumped back to create distance. Her hand reached toward the dagger that had fallen.
But before she could grab it, Judas was already there.
His foot struck out, kicking the weapon even farther away.
He's so fast. Belle knew the truth.
The difference in their status made it clear from the start, she was at a disadvantage.
What now, Belle? Judas asked calmly, his purple eyes watching her closely, curious to see her next move.
Behind her focused gaze, Belle's heartbeat quickened. Just the thought of sparring, of being this close to her idol, filled her with joy. But this wasn't the time to be a fangirl.
Judas, I want to impress you.
I want to make you and Mother proud.
Most of all. After this, I want you to look at me.
Not as a fellow adventurer, but as a girl. She knew the Loki Familia was full of beautiful women, and right now, she wanted to leave an impression strong enough that he could never ignore her. A small, burning wish ignited within her heart.
And because of that, I'll give it my all.
That wraps up this part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.